What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Frankie D'Astoli Show. I am your host, Frankie D'Astoli. As always, I'm excited to have you guys here. I got a little quiz for you this morning. A little quiz. Can anyone tell me what this is? Any guesses? That is my double espresso over ice from the Nespresso machine. If you heard the podcast a couple weeks ago, I talked about for my wife's birthday, we got the Nespresso. And let me just tell you something. It's been a game changer. It's been a life changer, honestly, in this house. We went from a Keurig family to an iced, Starbucks or Stoke or Stock, whatever that thing is called, that, the jugs that you get at ShopRite, to now the double shots of espresso in the Nespresso machine. We make them in the morning. Specifically, my wife makes it for me, which I'm very appreciative of. She puts it in the fridge. I let it kind of, marinate in the fridge for a couple hours. After I do my workout, after I have my protein shake, I put it over about 7 ice cubes in a mason jar, and it flows beautifully into the cup with a little bit of the foam on top that the espresso makes. And it is beautiful. It really is. And it just hits. It hits. Something about the Nespresso, something about like the double, espresso pods that just hits. Sometimes I'll get it from Starbucks. It depends. Some days it will be good. Other days it won't. But let me tell you something. Every single time out of the Nespresso, it hits and it's perfect. So if you don't have an espresso, I'm not, sponsored by them. I think most people actually probably see my videos on Instagram, Frankie D'Astoli _REI. They see that I'm usually carrying around a coffee from Dunkin' or Starbucks. Usually when I go out in the field, I will grab one. I like to drink it while I drive. I don't drink and drive, but I like to drink my coffee while I drive. But when I'm home, it's the Nespresso, it's the double shot, it's the Doppio, if you know about that life. And it's over ice, obviously, every single time. So, but again, not sponsored. I'm very excited. We have a great episode in store. I took a poll on Instagram probably about 6-7 weeks ago, roughly. And I, shouted out one of my own deals. And I shouted out in a way that actually wasn't super positive. I talked about kind of a mistake that we made and just some risks that comes along with real estate investing. But in the poll, I asked a question. And the question was, would you rather have cash out refinance money, okay, from doing what's called a cash out refinance, which we're going to talk about, or would you rather have more monthly cash flow? And I'm going to break down how exactly you even get to a question like that and what the determination is. But I was surprised by a majority of the answers. That a lot of the answers were actually that they would rather have more monthly cash flow, which actually surprised me. And myself and just a few other people kind of within my inner circle that I know of, and some other people on Instagram replied that they would rather have the cash out refinance money over the more monthly cash flow. And a majority of people replied more of the monthly cash flow. So I'm going to break down, let me just put my stuff on Do Not Disturb here. I'm going to be breaking that down today, and we're going to talk about the benefits to both, the pros, and there's really not many cons, but if we have any, we'll cross that bridge and we'll discover it. And we're going to talk about what maybe makes the most sense and why you would want one over the other. But before we get into that, I'm going to make a podcast about having kids and the beauty of having kids and why you should have kids and why you should have a lot of kids. But ultimately, I actually had one of those moments coming into my office before I was going to record, where I was walking up, I was grabbing my double shot over ice, and I was walking upstairs, and my wife played the song Little Bird from the Jonas Brothers, and she was a big Jonas Brothers fan. I was too, not going to lie. I remember I used to, dress up like Joe Jonas, and I'm pretty sure my sister Tara would take pictures of me and would try to like get them to notice me as like the fourth Jonas brother, even though there is another Jonas brother named Frankie, ironically. But long story short, Jonas Brothers, big part of everyone's childhood. That's roughly my age, late 20s, early 30s range. And my wife played the song Little Bird, and that's like me and my daughter's song, as it is, I'm sure, with so many dads and their daughters. But, I heard it and I walked upstairs and my daughter saw me and she ran to me and jumped into my arms and we did a little slow dance. And it was one of those things that just hits home a little bit real quick. And that's one of the beautiful things about having kids. When you have kids, these things just randomly happen. You don't need to go searching for joy. They literally bring it into your life. And it's one of those beautiful moments. And as these past couple of days have been going on, my wife's been taking the kids out a little bit more and I've had a little bit more free time. And I don't even know how to fill it. It's kind of interesting. It's like when I say this to, Christina all the time. It's like when we first had Bernadette, our first, our daughter, our first child, it was like, wow, we had so much time before we had a kid. That's like how it was. It was like, now we have a kid, like there's no free time. And now we have Francis, my son, and we're like, oh my gosh, like we had so much time when we had one kid. And God willing, if we have a third and a fourth and a fifth, and I want 8. So God willing, when we get up to that point, we keep saying back and we're like, wow, we had so much time when we had 2 or when we had 3 or when we had 4, right? So, and it's one of those things where, when you're not around your kids as a parent, you're kind of like, what do I do with myself? And I had a couple of those instances these past few days. My wife took the kids to her friend's house up in Central Jersey. And I got back from work. I think it was roughly around like 4:00. And I was just like, what am I going to do with myself? Like I had nothing to do. Like usually I come home and like the wife and kids are home. So it was like, I was kind of like, all right, what am I going to do? And a similar situation yesterday, she took the kids to her old ballet school, which was awesome. Bernadette got her first set of ballet slippers. It literally lost my mind when I saw the pictures. But again, I got back a little earlier yesterday, got back at like 1:00, and it was kind of like, all right, like what am I going to do? And of course I have like busy work to take care of and stuff, but there was still some spare time. So I decided to do what I love to do, which is go to Adoration Hour. And for anybody that doesn't know Adoration Hour is when you go to your church, most of the times they'll have what's called like an Adoration Chapel. It's a small little kind of, remote room attached to the church usually or off to some spot. And in that chapel is the Eucharist, right? It is the actual body of Jesus Christ. And you have the ability to pray and to be in the presence of God in that chapel. It's a beautiful thing. At my church, we're really awesome. They do it every single day. I think it's open from 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. I'm pretty sure it is every single day. So Friday, I was able to sneak in there. And yesterday, I was able to sneak in there. And yesterday, I prayed a really awesome, joyful mystery of the Rosary. I did all 5 beads of the joyful mysteries and was able to really reflect on it in the silence, in the presence of God, which is awesome. It's hard to sometimes come around that when you have a lot of busy things going on in your life. And then Friday, I went in as well. I didn't pray my rosary on Friday because I prayed it earlier in the day, but I brought a book of mine, which is Sermon in a Sentence. This was a book that was given to me for my birthday a couple years ago, and it's all sentences from sermons of St. Padre Pio. St. Padre Pio, very, very prominent saint, known for having the stigmata. The stigmata is when certain specific saints literally were given the wounds of Jesus Christ. They had wounds in their hands, the same wounds that Christ had when he was pierced with the nails on the cross, a wound in their side, and wounds in their legs and their feet. And Saint Padre Pio had the stigmata, and he was extremely reverent saint, known for performing, countless miracles. And he has this book, not that it was written by him, it was written by someone, but that they pulled all of these kind of, sentences from his sermons and wrapped it in his book. So a lot of times, whether it's Adoration Hour or I'm praying my rosary or I'm doing my holy hour in the morning, I'll pull out this book and I'll read some stuff. And I just want to share with you guys 2 that really stuck out to me during Adoration Hour, which I think are really awesome and I think we could all take with us. The first one is this. Let me find this here. It says from St. Padre Pio, I invite you to keep your eyes constantly fixed on He who guides you to the heavenly homeland. Why should the soul be despondent? Why should it worry whether it reaches the homeland by way of desert or through fields? As long as God is with you always and you constantly arrive at the possession of the true promised land, why should the poor soul be afflicted? And I think this is great to kind of reflect on because, the path to heaven is not a straight path, nor is the path to really anything you do in life. Anything that's worth having, it's not a straight path. And when I think of, the path to heaven and from reflecting on what Padre Pio here said, it's a mixture of a lot of different things, right? And he says, whether you get there through the desert or you get there through fields, think about the differences there, right? Fields, very beautiful, very relaxing, calming feeling, united with God type of feeling. The desert, not that, right? Anytime you hear the desert, whether it's in the Old Testament or the New Testament, it usually means trials and tribulations. But what he's saying is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're going through deserts or it doesn't matter if you're going through fields. As long as you have God with you and you are walking with him to the promised land, you're going to get there. I think that's just all about seasons of life. We all go through those seasons of life, right? There's those joyful seasons, feeling like you're in those meadows, feeling like you're in those fields, feeling like you're truly in communion with God. And you might feel his presence or just things are going really well in life. And then you have those deserts, right? Those sandstorms where it is challenging. It's hard to find God in those moments. but that is where the trials and tribulations are. But what Padre Pio is saying is either way, as long as you have God, you are making your way to the promised land. And I think it's very important to understand that there's going to be seasons of life. There's going to be times where you're in the fields. There's going to be times where you're in the desert. There's going to be times where you're in snowstorms, like you're in the Arctic, whatever the case might be. But as long as you walk with Christ, you will make it to the true possession, which is the promised land, right? So that was the first one that really resonated with me because, again, as a real estate investor, as a parent, as a husband, you go through those seasons of life, right? There's times where things are really easy and it feels great, and there's times where things are really hard. And ironically, sometimes it's easier to be in communion with God when you're in the desert as it is when you're in the fields. Because sometimes when you're in the fields, it feels like everything is so perfect. Pride kind of seeps in a little bit, like, oh, look at everything that I've built. Whereas when you're in the desert, you realize that you are actually pretty weak and you can't do anything without God. So it's kind of interesting how that there's a little bit of an inverse relationship there sometimes. And then the last one that I read, and then we'll get into the episode today. Let me just find this. From Padre Pio, St. Padre Pio. What I want from you is that as the trial increases, your abandonment and trust in God may also increase. And that was one liner that just absolutely hit home. As the trials increase, can you abandon yourself more? Can you give yourself over to God more and to say, you take care of it. You take my burdens. You take my struggles. I'm putting them at the foot of the cross, and I want you to take care of it, and take your soul and close its eyes and let him handle it. That is so hard to do. So hard to do. But that is the call of virtue, right? You can truly grow in virtue. You can truly grow in holiness if you are able to take your abandonment and increase it to the level of your trials increase. If you could do that, I promise you are on the right path. And it's hard to do. And I face that all the time. There are sometimes, let me tell you guys something. I have a tenant, right, who there's some trash in their yard. And that was from us doing the renovation. It was a little bit of a crazy situation. You had to like move in like as we were kind of still getting the reno done, just because her lease had come to an end. And we kind of had to keep pushing her a little bit just through some lack of, organization on project management. And there's some stuff in her yard. So we send out like one of our contractors to go, remove the stuff. And there's like 6 exotic snakes in the yard. We're on the East Coast. There's no snakes out here. It's not like we're in Tennessee or Texas, right? But like, I'm like, this is just another problem to deal with, right? Or issues with lending, whatever the case might be. These trials are always increasing. And there's that initial feeling of like, I need to take care of these things. I personally need to go and handle these things. And yes, to a degree, absolutely, it's your responsibility to make sure that those things get handled. But when it comes to some of this stuff, the ability to abandon yourself and to say, Lord, I'm facing these trials. These things are getting tough. It's getting real, real crazy out there. Please take these off my plate. Please help me in this situation here where I could really use you. So those were 2 that really stuck out to me while I was in Adoration Hour. Again, I made an episode last episode prior to this one, about 5 things you could do to bring faith into your family. I also talked about 3 of the big things that if you are really looking to up your faith journey, I would say going to mass is number 1, praying your rosary every day, and going to Adoration Hour. Again, find your Catholic church, find what times they have Adoration Chapel, go in the presence of the Eucharist, in the presence of Jesus Christ. You're literally in his presence, in silence. It's very reverent, and start praying. And again, if you don't know how to pray, all you need to do is this: Lord, I don't know how to pray. And you've already started praying. So let's get to the episode. Quick little shot of the Dopio. All right, so cash out equity, cash out refi money versus monthly cash flow. So let's just break this down real fast, right? Monthly cash flow. What is the actual definition of monthly cash flow? Well, let's just say you have a tenant that is paying you $2,000 a month. Okay, you're getting $2,000 a month in what's called gross rent. Okay, and let's just say you have a mortgage of $1,500. Okay, gross means keeping all things equal. You haven't deducted anything else. $2,000, which is your monthly rent, minus your $1,500, which is your monthly mortgage, is $500. That is $500 in what's called gross monthly cash flow. Okay. Now, let's just say you're a smart, savvy investor and you say, I know that eventually some things are going to go wrong here, right? There's a chance that, something breaks, or, there's a leak in some of the systems, or, in the pipes, or just in general, I'm planning for the future because I know that the roof is 15 years old and it might need to be replaced soon. I'm going to just set aside 20% every single month for reserves. So out of that $500, you take 20% of that, which is $100, and you put that in a reserve account. So now what you're left with is $400, which is called your net cash flow. And net means after things are deducted, right? And there's other deductions as well. If you leave money aside for vacancy, right? Vacancy is a very expensive thing for a real estate investor. If you have a turnover where a tenant doesn't renew their lease for whatever reason, and they decide to move out, and you have to do some repairs to the house. And in order for you to get a tenant in there, you need to remarket it. You could have a vacant property for 1, 2, 3 months. And think about that. That's $1,500 every single month that you as the investor still need to pay. So if it's vacant for 2 months before you get a new tenant in there, that's $3,000 out of pocket, right? So again, investors will put money aside for vacancy. They'll put money aside if they, pay a property manager. Some property managers are charging anywhere between 8 to 12% of the actual net cash of the net rent, So that $2,000, that's $200 that could go towards a property manager, things along those lines. But just keeping all things equal, tenant pays 2 G's, your mortgage payment's $1,500. You have a gross cash flow of $500. And if you put $100 aside, you have a net cash flow of $400. Today, we're really going to just focus on that gross number. So that gross number is $500. Now, I'm going to talk to you about what's called cash out refi. So a cash out refinance, I got to break this down even further. And I've broken this down in some prior episodes as well. A refinance, the definition, the purpose of a refinance is to replace your old loan with a new loan. So imagine you owe $100,000 on a specific property and you go to refinance that property. You are essentially going to the bank and you're saying, hey, I need a new loan from you. And that new loan is going to pay off my old loan. And I'm going to replace that old loan with the new loan that you're giving me. And for the next 30 years, which is how a majority of these work, I am going to pay you, new bank, on that new loan that you've given me until I decide to either sell the house or to refinance it again. That is it. A refinance, again, just want to break this down in super simple terms. A refinance replaces your old loan with a new loan. That's how it works, right? So when I go to get a refinance in my specific way, and the example that we're going to be talking about today, I do what's called a cash out refinance. So what a cash out refinance does is it does the same thing as a refinance. It allows me to replace my old loan with a new loan that I go get. But the beautiful thing is it allows me to tap into the equity in my house. Okay. Now I'm going to back this up for 1 second because some of you guys might be saying, well, what does equity mean, right? Equity is the difference between what the house is worth and how much you owe on the property. So again, let's say you owe $100,000 on the property, okay? You go to get a cash out refinance. And in the process of a cash out refinance, an appraisal needs to happen. Now, an appraisal is an educated, I'm trying to be as nice as possible about some of these things, but it's an educated guess in a sense of what your house is worth. And they hire an actual appraiser to make that educated guess. Now, they make that educated guess with backings by what's called comps, right? And I've talked about this before. Majority probably know what this means. Comps stands for comparable properties in your area. So basically, if you have a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, the appraiser is going to come in and they're going to say, hey, you have a 3-bedroom, 1-bath here. There's 3 other 3-bedroom and 1-bath houses that sold in this area within the last 6 months. One sold for $200,000, one sold for $175,000, and one sold for $225,000, right? And they're basically going to take those. They're going to break it down potentially by price per square foot or whatever the case might be. And then they're going to tell you what your house is worth. Now, appraisers have a very, very important job, right? There's a lot that really, really leans on what they do and what they discover. And the crazy thing is, like I said, it's a little bit of an educated guess because everybody has their opinion. It's really like a glorified opinion, but the bank trusts that opinion because one appraiser could come in and say, hey, your house is worth 150, and another one could come in and say your house is worth 200, right? So a lot of these things, it could truly vary. And this is where a lot of times things don't necessarily always go according to plan, as I'm going to talk about in the actual example that I'm going to bring forward. But long story short, you have a loan amount of $100,000 on this house. As you go for that cash out refinance, the lender hires an appraiser. The appraiser goes out there. You meet with them or your property manager meets them or whatever. You let them in the house, whatever the case might be. And then they put together an appraisal report, right? And let's just say for, some round number purposes here, the appraisal report comes back at $200,000. It's fantastic. Right? Why is that great? Well, it's because you owe $100,000, but your house is worth $200,000. So let's think about this for a second. Your house is worth $200,000. Your house is an asset. Okay, it's an asset. You owe $100,000. That $100,000 is a liability because you have to pay on that $100,000 every single month, right? The difference between those two is what's called your equity. And in this example, your equity is $100,000. Now it's awesome, right? Essentially what that's saying is that if the appraisal came back at 200,000, that means that the market's valuing your house at 200 grand. If you sold that house for $200,000, you would make $100,000 in profit. Now, prepare yourself to pay capital gains, potentially, income tax, unless you 1031 exchange it and do some other fancy tax stuff, which, that's a whole nother topic. But that 100 grand is equity. That's equity that you own, that you've built into the house, which is awesome. Now, there's a few things that you could do with that. A, you could just leave it there, right? And let it continue to grow. And eventually when you retire, you could, sell the house or tap into it or whatever it is. Or you could sell the house, or you could do a cash out refinance. So again, $100,000, that's the liability. $200,000, that's the asset. $100,000, that's the equity. How do we tap into that equity? The cash out refi is the answer. So you go to the lender and you say, hey, I want to do this cash out refinance. They get the appraisal out there. He says it appraises for $200,000. The lender then makes a determination. And this determination is what's called loan to value. All right. It also stands for LTV. And when you think about this term, loan to value, I want you guys to really think about it as it sounds. Loan to value. The bank, the new lender, is going to loan you money based off of the value of your property. So if they loan you money based off the value of the property, that means that they're going to loan you money based off of $200,000 in this example. Okay. Now, how much will they loan you? That's the follow-up question. So let's just say for round number purposes, the bank says, we're going to loan you 100% LTV, 100% loan to value. What that would mean is, cool, you go get that new loan and they're going to loan you $200,000 because that is 100% of what your value is. You take that new loan of $200,000, you pay off your old loan of $100,000, which all happens at settlement at the closing table, and you now walk away with $100,000 in equity. That's how it works. Now, as awesome as that sounds, no bank, at least that I've discovered, is loaning 100% loan to value. A majority of banks will loan at what's about 75% loan to value. There have been a few that I've known that have lended at 80%, very, very rare find. There have been most that I've found that have lent at 70%. So again, it all depends, but that percentage is huge because that determines how much you are actually going to be able to tap into that equity. So again, that 200,000, if they were to lend that, you would get 100 grand. But let's not use that example. Let's use the more realistic example. Let's say that the lender lends you 75% loan to value. Now, here's how this works. You take the $200,000 and you times that by 75%. Remember, that 75% is loan to value. That's how much the bank's willing to lend to you. So I'm going to do that on my calculator. 200 grand at 75% is 150,000, right? 150,000 minus $100,000, which is what you would be using to pay off your old loan. You'd be using that 150 to pay off your old loan of 100,000, leaves you with $50,000. Now, again, that's awesome. That's awesome, right? That's $50,000 in equity that you just got. And again, this is how this works, right? So basically what you need to know is how much is the bank going to lend me? Are they going to lend me 75%? Are they going to lend me 80%? Are they going to lend me 70%? Are they going to lend me 65%? That's a possibility as well. And the way that you know that is A, you need to talk to lenders. Okay. That's a big thing, obviously. And B, after you talk to lenders, is they're going to pre-qualify you. Now, the way that this works is they're going to mainly look at the asset itself. And again, one of the biggest things that they look at in the asset is they actually look at how much rent you're getting versus how much your payment, interest, taxes, and insurance are. Again, I know it's a little bit in the weeds, so you're not going to worry too much about that. But they're basically going to look at the asset of the house itself, how much income it's generating, and then they're most likely going to look at your credit score. A lot of times, if you're 700 and above, you'll get, really good terms. Maybe if you're like 740 and above, you'll get the greatest terms that are a little more rare. If you're like 680, you might get, not so good terms, but still somewhat decent. It varies by lender. So that's what you need to know. But here's what's the most important thing. That $50,000, that's tax-free. What do I mean by that? I mean, literally, you don't pay taxes on it, okay? The reason that is because it's not a gain. It's not a profit. You've simply tapped into the equity that you built in the home. That's why it's not taxed. Whereas if I were to sell that house, yes, if I were to sell it, I would make $100,000, right? If it sold for 200 grand minus closing costs, if I paid any as the seller. But then I'd also have to pay capital gains, which is 20%. And if I keep it and put it in my actual personal bank account, I'd have to pay most likely income tax on it as well. And if I'm taxed in a high tax bracket, because I flip a lot of houses, it might be a high income tax. So you can see how that could start to shrink and diminish. Now, still, I might make, whatever it is, 70,000 versus 50,000. But when I make that 50,000 on the cash out refi, not only is it tax free, but now I have a property in perpetuity. I have a property that adds a nice piece to my generational wealth factor. I have a property that's going to provide for me through passive income for the most part on my rents. And that's important, right? So that 50,000, yes, it might not be as sexy as flipping it and making 70,000 to 100,000, but I still have that long-term piece of generational wealth. And that's important. But here's where I'm going to kind of correlate this to the cash flow, right? So I'll bring in my example. On my poll on Instagram, I put up an example of, I had a property that Steve and I bought. We bought it for roughly like 62.5. It was roughly something along there. We were buying it for 55. The guy had some back taxes. We decided to cover a portion of that to still get the deal done for him. And then we had a reno budget. All in all, we were all in for $100,000 on the house. And we had projected this to appraise at 165. Okay. Well, when the appraiser came back out, the appraisal came in at 145,000. And again, this is what I mean. It's as much as it's kind of an educated guess on their end, it's also an educated guess on your end as the investor. The best way to get really good with your comps is to start to really understand an area and know as almost with as much certainty as you can that you're going to get the number that you need to in that particular area. But long story short, it came back $20,000 less than what we were looking for, right? And our total loan amount was 100,000. However, we had bypassed interest to be paid at the end of the loan. So all in all, our final payoff was about $107,000. So when you take that 145 at 75% loan to value, which I know everybody here knows what that is now, right? Loan to value, how much the bank is willing to lend based off the value of your home. It comes out to $108,750. Now, if you subtract out the loan amount of $107,000, that leaves us with $1,750. But here's the problem. We would have to pay closing costs, right? So all of a sudden, this deal that we used the BRRRR strategy on, which I've talked about before, we thought was going to be a great deal. We had projected this to be at $165,000 in, our appraised value. At 75% would have put us at $123,750 minus $107,000 is $16,750. Yeah, we're still going to pay some closing costs, but we were still expecting to walk away with like $10,000 in tax-free money. It's not happening at this point, right? So because I have such an amazing lender, he was able to, work it out and get me more loan to value, which I said is not typically the way that it works a lot of the times, but he was able to make it work out so that we didn't have to bring any money to the closing table, which was awesome. But the poll that I was putting up, and that was even before I knew that my lender was going to come in clutch like this, the poll that I was putting up was, would you rather have more monthly cash flow or more tax-free cash out money? And you might be saying, well, how does that work? What's the relationship between the two? Here's the relationship. So if this house appraises for $200,000, let's just say, right? Let's say the appraiser comes in and writes it up for $200,000. $200,000 at 75% loan to value is $150,000, as we discovered, right? That loan of $150,000, yes, it pays off that loan of $100,000, and you get that $50,000 in cash, in tax-free equity, in cash out refinance money. But you pay on that $150,000 every month. Now, let's just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. You're going to pay on that $150,000 every month. Let's just say the house appraised for $160,000. $160,000 at 75% is $120,000. What's higher, $150,000 or $120,000? Obviously, $150,000, right? How much, or that's probably not the best way to phrase it. If it's a higher amount of $150,000 versus $120,000, do you think your mortgage payment on $150,000 is going to be more than your mortgage payment on $120,000? Yes. Right? You're going to pay more of a mortgage payment for the higher loan amount that you owe. So if you have a $150,000 loan amount, I'm going to use round numbers here. Let's just say your mortgage payment is $1,000. Whereas if you have $120,000, let's say your mortgage payment is $800. There's a $200 delta there. And let's just say your monthly, gross rent, as we talked about, is $1,500. If you have a gross rent of $1,500 and you have a mortgage payment of $1,000, you have a gross cash flow of $500. But if you have a gross rent of $1,500 and you have a mortgage payment of $800, now you have a gross cash flow of $700. Keep that all in mind. That $150 minus your $100,000 gives you $50,000 in cash out refinance money. The $120 minus $100,000 gives you $20,000 in cash out refi money. Those are the differences that we're looking at. We're looking at a difference between $20,000 and $50,000 in tax-free cash out refi money, and the difference of $500 and $700 every single month in cash flow. Now, again, these numbers are not like totally accurate, so I don't want you to think like this is a no-brainer, because it's not. That's not necessarily how this works. I'm just trying to point out the differences between the two. And in my poll, that was my question. Would you rather have more cash out refi money or more monthly, gross cash flow? And again, to my surprise, a majority of people said more monthly gross cash flow. And again, I could understand if it's like a difference between like $500 and $1,000. You're talking about $500 over 12 months. You're talking about an extra $6,000 per year. There's a good amount of, meat there that it's like, yeah, I would definitely take that extra 6 G's a year for sure. My perspective on it, I was in the boat of I'd prefer the cash out refi money because I know without question it's tax-free money. But also, B, it gives me the opportunity to go out and buy more houses. Now, here's the difference. There is no right or wrong answer to this, right? I don't care if you're Robert Kiyosaki or you're, your neighbor who is a nurse practitioner. It doesn't matter. There's no one knows the exact answer here. The answer is all dependent on your situation. What makes the most sense for you? So in my situation, right? Take a little sip of my Doppio. In my situation, it makes sense for me to get the cash out refi money, and I'll explain why. I do not have a W-2. D&D Equities, I run it with my partner Steve. We're co-founders. We have a handful of employees at this point, which is really awesome. But that's what we do full time, right? I have my dojo, D'Astoli's Dojo, REI.com. I do some coaching and some mentoring and some training. I make a little money there. I have Rosary and Real Estate, totally non-for-profit. I burn money on that, but it's absolutely in my best interest to do so. It's for the salvation of souls. When I cash out refi a deal, that is how I make a majority of my money. Right now, Steve and I have 29 houses within D&D Equities. We have a gross rent of about, I think it's like $30,000 every single month that tenants pay in. And we have a holding cost every single month of about $27,000. We have a delta of about $3,000. The reason that is because we have about 8 renovations going on right now. So we have a lot of holding costs with no rent coming in at that moment. Technically, they're considered liabilities in Robert Kiyosaki's terms at this current moment. But eventually, when that equals out, we're going to have a nice delta of about $12,000 to $13,000, and we're continuing to build a portfolio. So right now, we can't really pull any money on our rents. It doesn't work like that. We pull money through cash out refinances, and we pull money through wholesaling real estate, right? But cash out refining is our biggest way of pulling money. We make a decent amount of money on the cash out refis because we're able to get them at cheap prices, and we're able to put work into them, and we're able to get them appraised high. So for us, we would, at this current moment, prefer the higher cash out refi money because we're able to tap into that money. We're able to get that. We're able to pay ourselves. We're able to continue our operations. We're able to do exactly what we need to do with that. Now, if you are someone who has a W-2, and maybe let's just say you're making anywhere between like $8,000 to $12,000 a year, and for you, it's like, cool, like I'm pretty comfortable. I'm maybe not like totally thriving at this current moment, but I know I have stability in my job and I make a good amount of money and I'm able to provide for my family and I'm able to go on trips and do anything I want to do. I don't necessarily need an extra $10,000 to $15,000 right now. I would rather have an extra $200 to $300 every single month coming to me that I know is going to be coming to me. And for me, I could plan a little bit more, and that's just good. It's more passive income for me, and I feel more comfortable with that coming in every single month rather than me having $10,000 to $15,000 right now that I might blow on things I don't really necessarily need, or just I don't necessarily know what to do with, and it's not going to be making the return that I want. Those are the two different mindsets. And again, from my perspective, in my current position, I want the cash out refi money. I want to use it to go buy more houses. I need it to pay my bills and to take care of my family and to do things like go to Disney in October, which we have planned, those types of things. I want it now. And I love that it's tax-free. Believe me, I love that. Whereas for you, if you have a W-2, it might not necessarily be that case. You may want the cash flow, right? Now, what I will say is on all of that note, as I said, there's no wrong answer to that. It's all about what you're going to do next. I think that's really, really important. When you have, there's a book that I read a while back. I should honestly pick it back up again. It's a short read. I think it's like 80 pages. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. And a big part of what that talks about is having your money work for you. You got to imagine every single dollar bill like a little soldier, right? And I've actually gotten really into chess lately. I would call myself relatively addicted at this moment. I started about 10 days ago and I play chess.com like all the time. And I'm ordering, chess boards and all of that stuff. But you got to think of your money like chess pieces, right? They need to strategically be positioned. They need to be earning a return. They need to be going to battle for you. If you're taking the $10,000 in cash out refi money and you're going and you're going to blow it, it doesn't make sense, right? But it's the same thing. If you're taking the extra $200 to $300 in monthly cash flow and you're going to go blow it, it doesn't make sense. You should be thinking about, how do I take this money to make more money? And whether you take that 10 grand and you go put it on a down payment for another house, or you put it towards marketing spend to generate more leads, or you, put it to hire out employees, or you put it to go buy a course so you can learn how to invest in, like laundromats or, multifamily properties, whatever the case might be. That is an investment. If you have the extra $200 to $300 every single month, what are you using it for? Are you using it to, up your grocery bill from already the $200 that it is every single week, or whatever the case might be, right? You got to just know, that's a bad example, but you got to know where you're going to take that money and what you're going to do with it. If you know that, you've already won. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether you go with the more cash out refi money or you go with the monthly cash flow. It doesn't matter, but you need to know where you're going to put that money. So again, I was relatively surprised, but I think a lot of people are maybe just in a different position than I currently am in regards to how they want to utilize that money. But for the most part, you can't go wrong. There's no right or wrong answer. I do need to jump off. I have a meeting with my transaction coordinator. We have 3 refinances that are in progress. But this was a great episode. I'm excited to kind of have covered that. I got a lot of cool stuff on the up and up. So keep an eye on the Frankie D'Astoli Show. If you're looking for coaching, mentoring, training, 12 and a half hours of online education, go to Dastoli'sDojo.rei.com. If you're looking to follow me on Instagram, just to kind of keep an eye on how things are going with all my portfolio stuff, Frankie D'Astoli_REI. And if you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to DM me. I usually am answering within 48 hours of any DM that I get. So feel free to reach out to me. But thank you guys so much for listening. Pray the rosary, buy real estate. I'll talk to you later. Peace out.